Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues for hearing this bill today. This bill was before the committee back in April, and the chair asked for it to be a 2-year bill, and so that's the direction we went, and we're back before the committee. Senate Bill 201 is about basic civil and human rights, the right for people to make fundamental choices about their own body. This legislation will ensure that people who are born intersex are able to make their own choices about their health and their gender identity instead of having other people make those irreversible surgical choices for them. If you can imagine having a medically unnecessary procedure on your body, wouldn't you want to have some input into whether that happens, as opposed to having other people make those decisions for you before you even have the physical capacity to be able to have input, because babies can't talk? To be clear, Senate Bill 201 is not about removing parents or physicians from the decision whether or not to have surgery. Parents and physicians under this bill will continue to have that involvement. Indeed, parents will continue to make the final decision. But right now, the only person who's not involved in the decision is the person whose body is being permanently changed, irreversibly changed. What we are saying under the amendments that we just put into this bill this week is that let's wait until 6 years old, when that child can at least participate in the decision and help inform parents' decision about what gender that child identifies with and whether that child wants to have medically unnecessary surgery in order to change and reconstruct their genitals. All we're asking, colleagues, is for the person impacted to actually be able to participate in the decision. When you operate on a baby, that person cannot participate. And to be clear, we are talking about medically unnecessary surgeries only. We are not talking about situations where there's a medical problem. There was a witness last April who came in and she testified about how she was satisfied with the surgery. She has congenital adrenal hyperplasia. And when she explained the problems that she was experiencing as a baby, that she couldn't urinate, that is a medical condition, and this bill would not preclude that kind of surgery. We're talking about perfectly healthy babies who do not have a health problem, but their genitalia do not conform with what we consider to be typical, and so there's an effort to quote unquote normalize the look. I want to just comment on the committee, and first of all, I want to thank the chair and his staff for having a very open door to us over the past year. We haven't always agreed on everything, but the chair and his staff have been very generous with their time, both to me and to my staff and to our coalition, and we very much appreciate the ability to have that dialogue. I do, however, need to respectfully disagree with a few aspects of the committee analysis. First of all, the analysis says that the definition in SB 201 of intersex is somehow inconsistent with other definitions. We don't agree with that. This definition is consistent with the United Nations definition and the definition as put forward by every major intersex group in the world. The analysis also focuses on chromosomes, whether you're XX or XY. And frankly, this analysis could have been written without ever even mentioning the concept of chromosomes, because chromosomes are 100% irrelevant to gender. And we see that with transgender people. People who are born, let's say XY, with let's say a penis that perfectly conforms to what society thinks a penis should look like. And that person, by the age of 5, is identifying as a girl. The chromosomes are irrelevant. The way the genitals look are irrelevant to someone's gender, and we see that with the transgender community, which is why this legislature has overwhelmingly passed bill after bill to protect transgender people, because we don't say that we look only at your chromosomes or how your genitals look to decide what gender you are and whether you should have surgery to reconstruct your genitals in a medically unnecessary way because of what your chromosomes are or what your genitals look like. The suggestions in the analysis, I know the analysis does not put forward amendments, but there are suggestions of what amendments could be. If we were to go in that direction, more than 80% of intersex people would be removed from the protections of this bill. For much of human history, people who were born intersex were just left alone. They just lived their lives, and that was that. It was in the 1950s that the medical profession decided that we needed to perform medically unnecessary surgeries to quote-unquote normalize these children. These surgeries, to be very clear, are very invasive and risky surgeries. It is reconstructing someone's genitals. It can cause permanent sterilization, permanent loss of sexual sensation for the rest of their lives, irreversible, permanent urinary tract issues, and these are serious potential side effects. And that's why it is, apart from any issue of gender, someone should be able to have input about whether they're going to have that kind of medically unnecessary surgery that could have profound negative impacts on them for the rest of their lives, and yet they had no opportunity to say whether they wanted to have that surgery. In what other circumstance would we allow that to happen to California residents? In addition, and separate from that broader issue, we know that the wrong gender can be assigned. That a doctor could say, well, you're XY, and this seems like it's more like a penis than a vagina, so we're just going to reconstruct it and make it into a penis, or vice versa. And then a few years later, the kid says, but I'm a girl. Well, you can't fix it then. Maybe you can, maybe potentially a little bit, but that is a permanent, irreversible decision that was made for that child, and that child's going to have to live with it for the rest of their life, even though they had no input whatsoever. Now, we have made amendments to the bill this week. We scaled back the bill around some what were considered potentially gray areas around hypospadias, one of the conditions. We listened and we heard and we made some changes. In addition, originally the bill said you can't perform the surgery until the child can provide quote-unquote informed consent, which we thought was reasonable because that's a well-developed body of case law. But various senators and others expressed to me that that might be a little too vague, that a physician may not know what's informed consent. So we changed it to make it a bright line, 6 years old. And the reason that we did that, we could have gone older. There's an argument to say you can't do it until the kid's 18. But we made it 6 years old because we thought it would strike a balance. The kid is about to start school, so they're still very early in their life. So if a surgical decision is made, the kid is still very, very young. But at 6 years old, a child is able to speak with their parents. Parents are able, in making the parental decision, to solicit feedback from the child. We know that a lot of kids who are 4, 5, 6 are already expressing what their gender is. That's more and more common these days. In addition, kids can express what they want. Do they want their genitals to look like this person's to daddy or mommy or their friends or whatever? They can express that, and so the parent can make the decision, at least having that level of input from a child, and can decide, you know what, this is a little confusing, let's wait a little more, or let's do it. In addition, the parent, because we know not all physicians, but there are some situations where parents, the child is born and the genitals are atypical, and they have no idea what just happened and what's going on. They've never heard of it before, they don't know. And then a physician will say, and this does happen, if you don't do this surgery, your kid's going to get bullied, their life is going to be messed up. And for parents, people, we revere doctors as we should. These are people who are saving lives. And for a lot of people, they just go with what the doctor is recommending. This will give them a few years to look at it, educate themselves, and make an intelligent, informed decision. I want to also note I have enormous respect for the California Medical Association and for this profession in general, including my sister, who is a physician in New York. And this is a profession that saves lives every day. It's a profession that I am usually aligned with, and it's not comfortable to be opposite the medical profession. I'll be very honest with you. But we need to also be clear that the medical profession is very divided on this issue, and there are a lot of doctors, and we have one here today, including urologists, who think that these procedures should be banned. You have a letter from hundreds of physicians in California and elsewhere asking you to pass this bill. You have a letter that is signed by 3 former United States Surgeons General, 2 appointed by Bill Clinton, 1 by George W. Bush, all agree, not taking a position on this bill because the bill didn't exist when they signed the letter, but all saying that these procedures should be banned, that there's no reason to have them. They make statements like, when an individual is born with atypical genitalia that pose no physical risk, treatment should focus not on surgical intervention, but on psychosocial and educational support. Cosmetic genitoplasty should be deferred until children are old enough to voice their own view about whether to undergo the surgery, and et cetera. Please review, you have it in your materials. The United Nations, in its report on torture, states, quote, children who are born with atypical sex characteristics are often subject to irreversible sex assignment, involuntary sterilization, involuntary genital normalizing surgery performed without their informed consent or that of their parents even, in an attempt to, quote unquote, fix their sex, leaving them with permanent irreversible infertility and causing severe mental suffering. The U.S. State Department says, quote, intersex persons routinely face forced medical surgeries that are conducted at a young age without free or informed consent. These interventions jeopardize their physical integrity and ability to live free. These are not fringe organizations. These are mainstream, credible organizations. And then finally, there's been a suggestion that we've heard that CAH, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, is somehow not intersex. The National Institutes of Health would disagree because they define it as a condition that leads to intersex traits. So the suggestion that CAH and also hypospadias be removed from the bill, which would remove the vast majority of intersex people from the bill's protections, is not something that we would support. Colleagues, we are in the first policy committee, the very first policy committee in the first House on an important priority civil rights bill for the intersex community and for the LGBT community. I ask you to move this bill out of committee today so that we continue to work and do the stakeholder outreach that we know is important. With me here to testify are the following 2 witnesses with 2 others who will be available to answer questions when they come up. First, Rick Sabur, the Executive Director of Equality California, then Bria Brown-King, an intersex person and membership coordinator with the Boys and Girls Club of Delaware, who flew out here from Delaware to testify because this is so important. And then we also have with us Dr. Barbara Chubak, an assistant professor of urology at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York, where my sister did her residency, incidentally, who also flew out here to testify for this bill. And then also to answer questions, Professor Julie Greenberg, who is the author of Intersexuality and the Law. So thank you for hearing me out today, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. So we invite your 2 witnesses to speak, and we'd like to ask them to keep their remarks to 2 minutes each, as we'll apply to the other side as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Rick Sabur, Executive Director of Equality California, the nation's largest statewide LGBTQ civil rights organization and a co-sponsor of SB 201. We're proud to support SB 201 because at its core, this bill is about the state of California respecting individuals' autonomy over their own body and in some cases gender identity, which is fundamental to all of our work regarding LGBTQ civil rights. The issue is in the international and national spotlights now. The UN Human Rights Commission, the European Parliament, Human Rights Watch, 3 bipartisan U.S. Surgeon General, the American Academy of Family Physicians have all called on the world to take action and protect the human rights of intersex people. In just the last week, CNN published a short documentary highlighting the importance of protecting children born with sex trait variations from these interventions, and specifically focused on this bill and your vote today. The world is looking to California and New York, where a similar bill is being considered, for leadership on human rights. It is important that we continue that leadership today. Every year, thousands of intersex children are born in the state of California, and right now, medically unnecessary interventions that cause long-lasting and permanent harm are being performed on children before they can even speak, which is a clear human rights violation. And while not all intersex people are LGBTQ, many are. Furthermore, issues of self-determination with respect to a person's gender identity and expression, sex and sexual orientation are all core to our mission, and allowing institutions or other people to determine those most personal aspects of our lives is an existential threat to LGBTQ civil rights. We've been told time and again that it's not the legislature's role to tell professions what they can and cannot do, but I reject that. And it certainly is the role of this committee. The California legislature protected LGBTQ youth from so-called conversion therapy. The California legislature protected female inmates from forced sterilization. And the California legislature has protected mental health patients from electroshock therapy. If we can't agree that the defense of human rights is the responsibility of the California legislature, then respectfully, what are we all doing here? The world is watching. The intersex, the civil rights, and the LGBTQ communities are watching. Will California continue to lead on human rights, or are we going to cede that leadership role to New York? I respectfully ask you for your aye vote today.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Next witness.
Hi, my name is Bria Brown King, and I was born with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, CAH for short. This means that my body doesn't produce enough cortisol, a stress hormone that our bodies need to function properly. And to compensate, my body naturally produces higher levels of testosterone. Testosterone produces what we typically refer to as secondary male characteristics. I am here to urge you to support people like me by passing SB 201 and protecting future intersex children from the pain and suffering that I went through as a result of deeply harmful surgery I underwent as a child. California should follow the lead of government agencies in other countries like Germany, Switzerland, Australia, Chile, and the European Parliament, and respected nonprofit organizations that focus on protecting children, including the United Nations, the World Health Organization, Amnesty International, the American Academy of Family Physicians, a bipartisan group of former U.S. Surgeon General physicians, Physicians for Human Rights, and the Human Rights Watch. After studying the issue, all of these government and NGO groups concluded that these medically unnecessary surgeries should be postponed until children are old enough to be involved in the decision of whether to undergo surgery. The San Francisco Human Rights Commission actually reached the same conclusion 15 years ago. Parents and doctors want to make decisions about intersex children's bodies because they deem it medically unnecessary based on their fear of our healthy bodies. However, what those individuals don't want to talk about is that we are perfect as we are. They don't want to talk about the cases like mine and so many others where surgery doesn't go as planned, or what happens years later when their daughters realize that they can't experience full sexual pleasure because that right was stolen from them without their consent or knowledge. The urologist who performed my surgery assured my family that undergoing a vaginoplasty to make my genitals appear more normal would enable me to be able to use my vagina. I don't know why he assumed to know about how I would or would not want to use my vagina. Why are doctors more concerned about preparing us to have sex with our husbands than actually having a healthy body capable of sexual pleasure? These high-risk and irreversible surgeries are performed to conform our bodies to gender expectations, often without patients having little or no say in this personal decision to determine what, if any, treatment or surgery is appropriate for us. They may be well-intentioned, but these surgeries are often carried out with the assumption that this is what the children would want as adults. In my case, I never did use my vagina in the way that the doctor assumed I would because most of my intimate partners have been cisgender women. Instead of preparing me for a penis, my urologist could have affirmed that there was nothing wrong with my intersex body. I started to personally identify as intersex before I even knew what the term was. I knew that I was different even though my family and my doctors tried hard to convince me otherwise. Eventually, I realized that I wasn't just the normal girl that everyone in my life wanted me to be. CAH manifests itself differently for everyone. It is important for young intersex children to go through the natural stages of human and character development before making a decision that could impact their lives forever. Because sometimes parents and doctors do get it wrong. I am the child of a mother who truly thought she was doing what was best for me, but got it wrong. I honestly would have kept my enlarged clitoris had I known then what I know now. When it comes to non-necessary medical procedures, children deserve to be old enough to make informed decisions about their bodies. I am so grateful to Senator Wiener for introducing a bill that would help preserve options for people like me and delay medically unnecessary surgeries until patients can participate in these decisions and determine what treatment or surgery is right for them. Children born in California deserve to be protected against injustice, and no one should ever have to seek justice for the right way for their own body. It's time to center care on the needs of patients themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, Bria, and to Rick. We'd like to invite those who share that view to please come up to the microphone and identify yourself and do a me too.
Tammy Martin on behalf of Equality California, of course, a proud co-sponsor of this bill, also stating the support of two of our partner organizations who could not be here today, the Trans Latina Coalition and the California LGBTQ Health and Human Services Network. Thank you.
Thank you.
Associated Students of UC Davis, full support for this bill.
Thank you.
Hi, also a student at UC Davis supporting this bill.
Thank you.
Hans Lindahl, Intersex Californian and Communications Director for Interact. Strong support.
Thank you.
Hi, ACLU of California, also a proud co-sponsor of this bill. Urge support. Thank you.
Oleander Quadra, community member, strong supporter of SB 201.
Thank you.
Nova Quadra, strong supporter for SB 201.
Thank you.
Sylvan Frazier, staff attorney at Interact, proud co-sponsor, strong support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Evan Minton. I'm here as a representative of Voices for Progress, as a representative of the California Democratic Party LGBT caucus, and also as a proud transgender individual, urging your support for this important bill and applauding Senator Wiener for continuing this fight.
Thank you.
My name's Madi Roby. I'm an intersex person with Interact, the Gender Health Center, and the Sacramento LGBT Community Center, and I support this bill.
Thank you.
Kika Torres, Communications Manager for the Gender Health Center, and strong support.
Thank you.
I'm Elora Gray, artist, writer, member of the LGBTQIA community and resident of San Francisco. Strong support.
My name is Santiago Casillas. I'm supportive of this bill, and I'm a community member. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Caitlin Lopez, and I'm in strong support of this bill.
Megan Cates, community member in strong support.
Jay Choi, community member, strong supporter of this bill.
Jeff Freitas, representing myself, a strong supporter and a board member of Equality California, how important this bill is to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adnan Manasian. I'm a Sacramento resident at Sac City College and also support this bill. Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else want to come and identify themselves in favor of the bill? Please come on up. All right, with that, we're going to invite those in opposition to come and share their views. If you could clear a little bit of space at the table for them.
We may have you, we'll have you come back up afterwards.
So to the opponents, we did allow the supporters to go over. We had allocated 4 minutes to them, and they went to 7.5 minutes. So we're going to try to have equal time here and make sure you understand that you can give us insightful information, but in 7.5 minutes or less. So welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in opposition of SB 201. My name is Hillary Kopp. I'm a Californian. I was born and raised here. I'm LGBT. I am a pediatric urologist at UC San Francisco. My division of pediatric urology is one that specializes in treating children with differences in sex development, also known as DSD. I chose a career in medicine because I'm passionate about helping people lead healthier and happier lives. And I take great pride in our work, much of which entails advocating for our patients' individual needs. This includes making individualized recommendations for each patient by educating families so that they can act in their child's best interests. I firmly believe that healthcare is not a one-size-fits-all. SB 201, however, treats every child the same, ignoring the potential impact of delayed treatment. Senate Bill 201 prohibits any medical treatment for all children born with variations in sex characteristics until the age of 6. It's important you know that this bill doesn't just impact the few rare intersex cases, but instead treats routine and complex cases equally. In doing so, the bill removes all flexibility for trained medical professionals and their loved ones to do what is in the best interest of the patient. The bill does provide a path for treatment deemed medically necessary. The bill charges the medical board in conjunction with a defined committee of 10 to determine what is and what isn't medically necessary for routine and complex cases. This is a dangerous precedent that places the treatment of children in the hands of a few that cannot take into account each patient's specific set of circumstances about which they are making a decision. And oddly, only a few of the individuals determining medical care are even required to be physicians, let alone specialists who care for these children. Treatment of DSD has advanced significantly in the last 20 years. It's unfortunate that many supporters of this bill cite cases from over 30 years ago as justification to pass this bill. Our specialty and the larger medical community continue to review and study these complex conditions in order to advance the care for patients that we are discussing today. We now have a rigorous team-based approach involving multiple specialties to provide families with resources and, importantly, choices. Surgery is not always recommended, yet it is important to have options in difficult and complex situations and circumstances. SB 201 removes this. While I understand the Senator's intent, I'm concerned that withholding treatment options for complex medical cases will negatively impact the children that are affected by this bill. Senate Bill 201 is the wrong approach, and we respectfully ask you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Bogard. I'm a lifelong California resident, a board member, and immediate past board chair of CARES Foundation, and mother of a son who has salt wasting congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. At the time our third son was born, we knew something wasn't right. He was vomiting, losing weight, and becoming more lethargic, but we had no idea he had CAH until he nearly died of an adrenal crisis at 3 weeks of age. That experience was not unusual at the time. Fortunately, that's now rare in the U.S. because of the efforts of CARES Foundation, who successfully advocated for CAH newborn screening in all 50 states. CAH is a life-threatening medical condition that affects both males and females, but certainly does not impact each patient equally. There are various forms of CAH, some of which can lead to variations in sexual characteristics. The patients, however, are genetically male or female, and the vast majority do not identify as intersex. This bill has consistently included CAH within its definition even after the majority of the CAH community has repeatedly asked for it to be removed. The vast majority of patients with CAH do not support this bill and oppose a one-size-fits-all approach to caring for those with this complicated medical condition. It's troubling to CAH families who have a higher likelihood of having another child with CAH to think that this bill could restrict any treatment until the arbitrary age of 6, and just as troubling, defer all medically necessary questions to a group of people who have never seen or treated their child. CARES Foundation and I are not advocates for surgery or mandating any particular treatment. We believe families should be afforded the opportunity to care for their children with all available treatment options and without the harsh restrictions in Senate Bill 201. Because of my board involvement, I know full well how difficult it is for women who are satisfied with their treatment at an early age to come forward and share such personal medical stories in a public forum. It's important they have a voice. Girls with CAH are disproportionately the largest group affected by this bill. As a group, they overwhelmingly oppose SB 201. On behalf of CAH patients and families throughout the state of California, I urge you to vote no on SB 201. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Bogard, and thank you, Dr. Kopp, for your testimony. I'd like to invite others who are in opposition to this bill to come up to the microphone and do a Me Too on, with your name and your affiliation, if any.
Good afternoon, Matt Back, representing the Society of Pediatric Urology and the Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons in California in opposition to the bill.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Brandon Marchi with the California Medical Association, also in opposition to the bill.
Thank you.
Hello, Scott Sparks, pediatric urologist at Children's Hospital Los Angeles and member of the LGBT community, strongly opposed to this bill.
Hello, my name is Randy Olson. I'm a grandfather of a girl that has classic CAH, and I am opposed.
Hello, my name is Courtney Baker. I'm the mother of a child with classic CAH, and I am opposed.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jenna Whaley Cora, and I'm the mother of a child with classical CAH, and I am opposed.
My name is Lily Wah. I'm a pediatric urologist at Valley Children's Hospital, Madera. I strongly oppose.
Tim Madden, representing the California Society of Plastic Surgeons, in opposition.
Ryan Spencer with the American College of OBGYNs, District 9, in opposition.
Erin Taylor with the Children's Specialty Care Coalition in respectful opposition.
Min Chow, I'm a pediatric urologist at Loma Linda Children's Hospital. I oppose this bill.
Richard Mogensen, I'm a professor at UC Medical Center. I want you to closely look at Section E-1 of 9 things that interfere with treating people under 6 years of age.
Patricia Barrett. I have a family member with CAH, and I strongly oppose this bill.
I'm Eric Bogard. I traveled from Southern California, where I was born and raised. I have salt wasting CAH, and I do not see it as an intersex condition.
My name is Janet. I traveled up from San Diego. I was born with CAH, had my successful surgery at age 12, and wish it had been as an infant. I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses in opposition that would want to come to the microphone? Okay, so we're going to close that part of our public hearing and invite members of the committee to ask any questions that they would like to ask. Any questions? Okay. If not, I will. Go ahead, Senator Pan.
Thank you so very much. And first
of all, I want to thank the author for the conversation, and I did vote for the original resolution. I am concerned because in terms of this bill, I mean, we're now saying that it's unprofessional behavior to perform any sort of medical treatment. Now, this, you said medically unnecessary, and I think that's the rub, exactly how we define that. So perhaps, and I know that the witness in opposition, sorry, I'm blanking on your name right now, Dr.
Hillary Kopp.
Okay, Dr. Kopp. Can you describe, you talked about a multidisciplinary process, can you describe what the current state of the art is, the current process you're at UCSF, when a child is born with, an intersex condition? You're right, it's not about the chromosomes. It's so you have a child who has, I guess we call it atypical is the right word, but genitalia. What is the process by which you evaluate that patient, and how are decisions made about which treatments, including procedures, should be done more urgently, and which ones can wait? And because I think that's I think there is a good case to say that, well, what's the rush, right, for many of these things. So how is that currently done now? So if you had a patient who's born and they consult you now, and that could happen tomorrow or probably happened last week, tell me what happens.
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss this more. You're very correct. This isn't something where we just look at it and say this patient looks like a boy or a girl and decide on surgical interventions. In fact, this is about choice. This is a very complex process and decisions that are made. The multidisciplinary team involves physicians from various specialties, including pediatric endocrinology, pediatric urology, psychiatry, genetics. This isn't just about the chromosomes, but it is also about the chromosomes, about the gonads. It's about the physical appearance, all of those things together. But we spend enormous amounts of time and have spent years studying this, and it is an extremely complex process that we have a significant amount of concern where we're talking about 10 people, 3 of which are physicians that most likely are not from specific specialties that have spent all of this time studying these conditions and continuing to study them. The baby is born. There is nothing immediately done for the baby other than medical treatments that are extremely important, especially in situations such as salt-wasting CAH. If the baby were sent home and this was not identified and medical treatments weren't given, the baby would die from a crisis at home. They can get infections and die from overwhelming stress that this causes in the body. There are absolutely no immediate decisions made, and there are multiple visits and multiple conversations with family members, with multiple physicians of all specialties, including psychiatry. And in fact, very rarely are we actually talking about surgery. That is just an option, and if we exclude these options, we'll have patients not walking into our doors, and in fact, going elsewhere, and it will be the people with less means that are unable to travel to other places to have these discussions that will in fact suffer. But the people who still want surgery and know that it's there are going to go elsewhere. For us, this is not about surgery. We're not here for surgery or against surgery, and that's extremely important. And we're not performing the surgeries that are being insinuated. We are offering all medical treatment options, and in fact, when we are unsure of diagnoses, the majority of the time in clinics such as this that are at multidisciplinary clinics that are at academic centers, when we are unsure, we are not offering surgery. We are discussing surgery, and we are not pushing it. It's an option.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, because one of the contentions is that physicians are actually pushing parents. Right. Saying that you need to have surgery to fix this. You're saying that, I mean, we're not talking about 30 years ago. I'm talking about, because this law is about now and into the future.
Right.
And,
one of the most important things about being a surgeon is never pushing an agenda or a surgery. That's not how we That's not how we operate. It's important to make sure that that the decision is made and it's an informed decision that's made together. There's shared decision making that occurs with the family, and in no way are we pushing any agenda. It's about options and education.
And maybe let me just clarify. So one of the situations that I think the proponents have expressed concern, I think reasonable concern, is that, okay, child's born, parents are anxious, right? Because usually I ask, my answer to people about kids is like, what's their APGAR score? But most people say it's boy or a girl, right? And then they they want to be able to give an answer. And certain parents, they, depending on their background or so forth, may want to push for surgery to resolve that question. Have you, you're a pediatric urologist, have you ever told a parent, you know what, maybe it's best to wait? That's not something that needs to be resolved right now. I mean, do you actually discourage surgery when you feel that it's inappropriate for the child?
Absolutely. And in fact, we don't even assign genders when we talk about the baby. And we talk about, for right now, it's so much harder to assign a gender and come back. Well, there are so many things that we're unsure about. This is such a complex issue. And of course, we want to get it right, that we would never want to do anything willfully harming any child or family. So we're very careful about assigning gender in the first place. The baby is not automatically assigned a gender. And we, again, do, discuss with the teams, the nursery, the family about taking time before any gender is assigned and referring to the child as the baby. And then that further testing will need to happen, including genetic testing, hormonal testing, and that we have a very supportive environment where we can learn more about this. We do align them with organizations where they can talk to other families that are also going through these things.
Okay, and then finally, so someone might say, okay, well, if that's what you do, this bill doesn't do anything to stop you from doing that. So what's the problem with this bill? So what would this bill, if it became law, stop you from doing that might be harmful to the child?
Well, first of all, again, I think it takes away the ability to have conversations about things and present options and inform the family members. It also is very broad, and in our opinion, goes well beyond what we know to mean intersex. And we will certainly say that this is a very complex condition, many conditions that potentially can make up the definition of intersex, and that's why we see such variations in the incidence of intersex. We'll hear anywhere from 1% versus 1 in 4,500, which would be more realistic in how we view intersex. But certainly, as you heard earlier, there are many people with CAH that do not feel that intersex that CAH is an intersex condition, and in fact, there are studies that support that 95% of CAH patients that are raised as female identify as female, and a few percent have gender issues, about 1%. And that's a documented study actually in the report from 2005 by Dessen and colleagues. And also hypospadias. Hypospadias is in and of itself a very complex issue. Yes, sometimes it is associated with intersex, but above and by far, the majority of hypospadias that we see and treat is not a part of an intersex condition. And I think to limit us by broadly saying and including those both CAH and hypospadias, or even trying to nail down specific diagnoses, you can see there's already confusion in that. And so I have extreme concern that if we legislate this issue, that there are going to be a generation of children who suffer profound consequences that we're unaware of.
Okay, so I appreciate your responses to the questions. I think the broadness is a bit concerning. Again, an example that unfortunately I had personal experience with is that we had a child who was born, the parents requested a circumcision. I know there's people out there who might feel circumcision is a medically unnecessary procedure, and while performing the circumcision, discovered the child was hypospadias, so we couldn't tell before. And I'm not sure whether that would then put the physician who performed the circumcision, because they performed the procedure that some people would classify as medically unnecessary, now at risk because that child also has hypospadias. Now, we discovered it it was not hypospadias repair, it was discovered during the performance of the circumcision. But I think the vagaries is a bit concerning, and that certainly falls under medical treatment. But I would also say that, I think the intent of the bill and where we want to go is in line with, I think, where the medical profession wants to go, at least talking to many of my own colleagues in the medical profession. I think the concern is that the law is a blunt instrument, and trying to put something like this into law, and it's not like, because I know what also has come up is, for example, conversion therapy. There is pretty much unanimity, as much as there can be in the, both the medical and mental health profession, that conversion therapy is bunk and that it's harmful and that so forth. I think in this case, I think we're trying to sweep up a lot of different things. There's a lot of good reasons for this, that the intent of this bill, but I think the concern is that's also sweeping in a lot of other stuff that may be concerning. But thank you so much.
Okay.
Mr.
I'm going to go to, just a moment, please. I want to go to other senators, but I do want to do a follow-up to Dr. Kopp, and it might be unfair, but to ask you this, given you have you practice at UCSF, but a criticism of these procedures, the supporters say that these surgeries are occurring at major hospitals across the state, challenging your assertion, not what you do at UCSF, but can you speak to whether these are occurring in other hospitals?
Well, there are across California and across the United States, for that matter, these DSD multidisciplinary clinics exist at all of the academic, the majority of the academic centers within California. I think the problem with answering your question is, again, which surgeries you're talking about, because there are medically indicated interventions for when the urethra and the vagina are a single channel that exit onto the perineum, which is this outer surface of the body. And for various reasons, these channels are separated, not only to limit urinary tract infection, but you could imagine menstruating through a single hole and placing a tampon, and how do you urinate? Filling that poor drainage and stenosis, which is narrowing of that channel, can again cause difficulty with urination and the urine going up into the vagina and uterus and dilating the vagina over time. Those surgeries most likely are performed at institutions across California and the United States.
Well, let me try to narrow. Under your definition of intersex, and I understand we have a difference of opinion on the issue of definition, okay? And I know we'll get to that. But under your definition of what intersex is, not other procedures then, as we've been talking about, are those procedures happening without the same interdisciplinary approach that you have at UCSF and at other hospitals or facilities around the state?
I don't think that I could, for certain, comment on whether or not they're occurring at other. I think the majority of
let me try it differently. When a child is born with the intersex definition as you define it, is that something that is typically a surprise, or is it something that is typically seen during the pregnancy, so that when that child is born under your definition of intersex, that the medical community is aware of that circumstance?
So that also will give a complex answer. Okay, sometimes we will know about the diagnosis before the child is born, and other times we won't. So, for example, in a child that has previously had a sibling born with CAH, there's a high likelihood that that other child will be born with CAH. There are occasionally times when we can see on prenatal ultrasound that a child looks like it has a phallic-like structure, which would be, in other words, a penis, but their chromosome analysis shows that they're XX. So there are occasionally times when we're alerted ahead of time, but there are also times when a child is born and that it is not known that the child is intersex until the child is born.
So not all of medical care in California happens in our major urban cities with major urban hospitals. So in rural settings, aren't we vulnerable without some guidance to maybe having a physician who isn't as educated or doesn't have the interdisciplinary team around them to perform unnecessary surgery?
The great thing is that we have a good referral system, and all the time, the children that we're treating within our DSD clinic are not coming all from San Francisco. So those children are referred. When I'm on call, very frequently I get calls from Salinas or various places throughout Modesto where children have been born and there's a question about their genitalia, and we have them transferred, or if they're stable, they can be discharged from the hospital and follow up on our DSD clinic.
Okay, and I want to correct myself because I know language is important here, and I used the term unnecessary surgery, and I should have said sex assignment surgery, which is, I think, what I understand. At least I originally understood as the essence of the bill: sex assignment. That godlike act occurring without real reason.
Our reflex in these situations is not to operate. We don't want to do something that is not irreparable. We're not trying to perform sex assignment surgery. We do our very, very best to assess all of the information that we can: genetics, endocrinology, psychiatry, all of this, multiple visits with families. And if there's any question, we're not operating.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I would appreciate if Dr. Chubak could have an opportunity to. That's been a lot from.
We're going to give. We've got plenty of time. Don't worry.
I just think we have another urologist here who I think has a different perspective, and I would hope that Dr. Chubak could also respond to these questions rather than just having one-sided.
I think Senator Leyva is asking specifically. Yes. Dr. Chubak, would you like to respond?
Okay. So hello, everyone. As you know, my name is Barbara Chubak. I'm an assistant professor of urology at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York. My clinical practice, research, teaching are focused on the diagnosis and treatment of sexual dysfunction in adults. So just to be clear, I'm not a pediatric urologist. But I was first exposed to the controversy around surgical management of intersex early in my medical career while I was applying to medical school. And this awareness motivated not only my interest in going into urology, but also my decision to defer residency to first pursue a fellowship and degree in bioethics. So I bring both those perspectives to our discourse today. A couple of things that came up in the course of the back and forth. So many. I tried to take notes so I wouldn't miss anything, but forgive me, I might have to circle back as our conversation continues. In the rebutting witness testimony to this bill, there was a conflation of medical and surgical care, and I think it's really important that we recognize that nothing in this bill is limiting medical care for these patients diagnosed with DSD.
Just continue.
It's talking about limiting surgeries done before 6 years of age. The question that was raised of identifying a hypospadias at the moment of circumcision, that is excluded from this bill, which very explicitly does not address questions of distal hypospadias. The question of what is and is not medically needed is, of course, a very thorny one, and certainly there's room for criticism of the bill's proposal that it be pushed to a multidisciplinary team under the auspices of the medical board. For example, Dr. Kopp mentioned the issue of a urogenital sinus, where there's a combined channel for the exit of urine and menses. That issue of the menstrual fluid being being problematic doesn't arise before age 6. Children are, even with the periods getting earlier and earlier, that is not the usual situation that a 6-year-old is going to be grappling with that problem. So there is space to pause without injury to these children. And finally, the chairman mentioned very, very astutely that multidisciplinary teams are something that certainly our profession has called for now for a very long time. But the unfortunate reality is that they are observed more in the breach than in the observance. Wonderful academic centers like UCSF, yes, have robust and truly multidisciplinary teams. But the reality is that even at most academic medical centers, a multidisciplinary team is a urologist and an endocrinologist, and not the full array of personnel that Dr. Kopp describes at UCSF and that the bill prescribes at the medical board.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Chuback. I want to invite other senators who have questions, and I do have some that I'm holding, and then we'll invite the author to engage further. Senator Leyva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Wiener, for your work on this bill. Dr. Kopp, I agree with you when you say that it is a complex issue, and children will suffer profound consequences if this bill passes. I would not agree with that and say that I think that children are suffering profound consequences now. I think the bill, you've done some work on it. I'm going to move the bill at the appropriate time, but I'd like to see you do some more work on it. I think it is an incredibly complex issue, but it's people's lives that we're talking about, children's lives who become adults. And if we don't get it right, then there are profound consequences. So I hear both sides. You're both very passionate. I do worry that at a hospital that is not a teaching hospital, that maybe there isn't just the attention given to the issue that is given at a hospital like UCSF. And if we, as legislators, can't do something to help the process and try and get it right, it's a big issue. We don't always get it right. So this, as Senator Wiener said, this is the first policy committee, and it has a long way to go. And I always like to think that as bills move through each policy committee, they get a little better, hopefully. But I'd like us to continue this because I think it's such a huge, huge issue. And as a new grandmother, there's things that you learn in this job that you didn't know when you had your own children. I didn't know anything about intersex. And I remember, she's 3 months old thinking, wow, I wonder if this is something that we will have to deal with. And thinking about talking about the baby as a baby and not as a he or a she, and how important that is. As one of the witnesses, I think it was Bree, testified that, we don't focus on a healthy baby. Sometimes we too much focus on, is it a boy, is it a girl? And then if there's anything that doesn't look exactly like a boy or a girl, we tend to freak out. So I think one of the benefits in this job and in this bill is that we get things out there that the public is not used to talking about. And I applaud the witnesses who came and shared their very personal stories, because that's not easy to do, but it makes us smarter. It makes us better legislators. So I thank you, Senator Wiener. I thank all the witnesses. I would like to see a few more tweaks to the bill and maybe narrow the scope, but I will move the bill when appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Senator Wiener, I think that first, thank you for your patience and your passion in an area of great importance. And I know you've worked with my staff and with me and with others to try to find compromise, if we can, from our hearing that we had last year. And I know a lot of work has been put in, and I appreciate it very much. I'm trying, I think that some of the issues that remain for me, one of them is the issue of definition. And we've talked about this here this afternoon a little bit. That I oppose, as you do, sex assignment surgery, unless there is a complete examination by medical professionals where the sex of the child is unclear. So I think there's a place where we are in agreement about sex assignment surgery. Where it gets difficult is that there are circumstances in which, I would put the three categories. Category A is where a child is born with male chromosomes and male organs. Category B is a child born with female chromosomes and female organs. And category C, which for me is the intersex category, where all that is in question. And so where I'm having difficulties is that if you fit in category A or B, where things are aligned except for some physical characteristic or physical trait, why it now goes into this category of intersex, and therefore would have the limitations that you describe in the bill in terms of what could occur. Could you speak to that?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that opportunity. And I'm assuming that you're talking about a situation where there is not a medical necessity, where there's not a health condition. So, for example, we've heard about...
Yes.
Because I just want to be clear, because there's been a little bit of conflation today. Everyone agrees that if CAH, the underlying adrenal problem, adrenal imbalance, we all agree that that must be treated immediately. That's a medical emergency. Nothing in this bill stops the treatment to correct or address the adrenal imbalance. Nothing in this bill stops that. But once you address medically the adrenal imbalance, the question is, do you then proceed to perform the surgery to quote unquote normalize the genitals? So I just wanted to be clear about that. If you think about, let's just step back and think about transgender people. Someone who is born with XY chromosomes, who has genitals that any of us, if anyone were looking at a doctor, parents, anyone would say that is 100% what we would consider to be a normal looking, quote unquote, penis. Everything about this baby says male. But then that baby 5 years later or 10 years later or 15 years later identifies as a woman. And so even in the situation you describe where there's XX or XY, something that clearly is a penis or a vagina, that doesn't mean that you said sex, it's really about gender. That doesn't mean that child is going to end up identifying with that gender, and yet a gender decision has been made for that child by physicians, by the parents, without any input. It's not about sex, it's about gender. Putting aside even the issues of permanent harm.
But Senator, sex and gender, with all respect, sex and gender, I'm not talking about gender, how you self-identify. I'm talking about your physical characteristics now. Because you can, whatever your physical characteristics, you can identify whatever you want to identify, right? So you can have all male parts, all female parts. You can decide you're the opposite in terms of your own gender selection. So I want to separate them here because I think that
I don't think you can separate them, Mr. Chairman. I don't think you can. This isn't about just how someone self-identifies. This is about what someone is, what their gender is, and gender does not always conform to chromosomes and sex organs.
No, and we're in agreement there. So there's no difference that if you decide that you're gay, that's not based necessarily on your bodily parts, but how you feel about yourself, right? We agree. That's a gender selection. But I'm really talking about the physical circumstances in which that child is born.
Right, but the reason
where there is no conflict, I'm going to give you plenty of opportunities to answer, but where there is no conflict between chromosomes and traits, except for some issue, and we talked about it, CAH is one example of that. I'm trying to understand that is not an issue of your own self-identity at any point in your life. It's really about whether or not if you're born with an enlarged clitoris, and the choice is to reduce it to quote unquote normal size, that where in that is it creating a conformance? Where is that? Is it creating a sex assignment? That's what I'm trying to get to.
So let's say you have a baby that's born with XX chromosomes, with a baby that's born with XX chromosomes and an enlarged clitoris. And so then surgery is performed, assuming there's not a medical condition. Let's say it could be from CAH and the adrenal imbalance is addressed, and then a clitoral reduction is performed. So that means you're removing tissue. And then let's say 5 years down the line or 10 or 15, that kid says, but I'm a boy. And that person decides, I want to have surgery to conform my body to what my gender is. But that surgery performed as a baby could make it harder or even preclude the surgical interventions, the voluntary ones. So by making that choice to say, we think this is what you are, you haven't told us that, you can't talk, you're a baby, then you perform the surgery that makes it harder for that person to do what they want to do with their body based on their gender in the future. That's why these permanent decisions can be so catastrophic for people.
Got it. And I think that's a good explanation and one that I agree with in terms of what that conclusion could be. But the other side of it is that all those children who have had that procedure done, who have had that reduction or had the tissue changed in some fashion, and they're happy with that circumstance, right? And so while I agree with you that you could have in certain cases where you're unhappy with that procedure being done, how do we take into account all those others where that procedure actually enhanced their life physically, mentally, and in lots of ways, right? Which is also a positive.
And we do that by saying that when you're 6 years old, you can have the surgery. And if you look at, and what we do in this legislature every day, and it's really hard for all of us, is there are some there's some issues that are so clear cut. There are other issues where there are, it's not as, there are balancing equities. And the question is, we agreed, there are people who have the surgery who years later are really happy that they had the surgery. We're not disputing that. We're not trying to erase them. There are some efforts to erase intersex people and minimize them, but we're not trying to erase the people who were satisfied with the surgery. But the question is, if you have someone who wants the surgery and delaying it to 6 doesn't prevent them from having it, and then they go on with their lives, versus the person who has the surgery as a baby, and then and they're not satisfied with it, and it's too late, they can't do anything about it. Where do the equities lie? There's only one group there who cannot make that change in the future because the decision's made for them. So I think the equities are pretty clear here on that particular issue.
Okay, I appreciate your clarification, and it's a place where we may have some differences on. I spoke earlier about someone being gay. It's a sexual orientation. I didn't mean to imply it's not a gender identity.
And Mr. Chairman, you've been very supportive of our community, and I appreciate that.
All right. The third place that maybe you could speak to is that in your bill it puts limitations on what procedures can go forward, but you create a committee in the medical board to do that to provide that guidance. But your bill says that the procedure cannot carry any meaningful risk of harm, and that's a very broad definition of where things can be done. I mean, there's almost nothing you can do and we can invite our medical professionals here to advise on this, but there's almost nothing that one can do medically that doesn't create some potential for harm. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. And I think the reason for that, in short, is that we are giving the medical board this authority to craft the standards, but we're also guiding it by saying that that if something, in terms of what's medically necessary, because we are erring on the side of being restrictive when there is not an immediate medical issue. And on the issue of medical necessity, so we have, we've gone through in this bill, we put the medical board in as a way of saying, okay, we're not going to micromanage this. This is the board that oversees the medical profession. To be very clear on the definition of medical necessity, I have been crystal clear in meetings with the opposition and otherwise that we are absolutely open to new ideas about what, if this isn't the right approach or the right definition to defining medical necessity, we invite ideas and language. I have had meetings with the California Medical Association where they've raised that they don't like our approach to defining medical necessity, and I've said, great, can you please provide me with your idea? They haven't done that, and that's not a criticism because they've taken basically a categorical opposition, so they're not, engaging with us on the details of the bill and proposing different language because they're simply opposed. So I'm not criticizing them, but it makes it challenging, Mr. Chairman, when you have these issues and you have opposition who are not engaging on that level. That does make it more more challenging. So we are also awaiting feedback for the medical board. We haven't received it yet, but we will, about their take on this and whether they would like changes. So, Senator Leyva is absolutely right. This bill will continue. This is not one where we're saying we're never going to make any amendments to this bill. We have made amendments based on feedback that we've gotten, even though we don't have opposition who works with us on those amendments, and we'll continue to do that. And I guess I can say this now or in my close, because there were some statements made today by the opposition that I think are just factually inaccurate. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want me to wait to talk about that or do it now.
Yeah, you're welcome to do it as you're close.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, colleagues, again, thank you for hearing this today. I know this has been a long hearing. This has been a controversial bill, but it's an important one, and it does implicate the basic civil rights and human rights of these intersex individuals. The intersex community does exist, and you've heard statements today about it's few, it's rare. It's actually a higher percentage than some other communities. This is not an insignificant number of people. When we heard about a statistic, 95% of CAH patients end up identifying as female. First of all, that means 1 in 20 don't, and they just got that surgery even though it doesn't conform. There is data indicating that about 1 in 8 don't identify as female, so more than double the statistics that you heard today. For proximal hypospadias, which is still part of the bill, 25% of those patients do not identify as male, and yet these surgeries, quote unquote, fix their penis, even though they end up 1 in 4 identify as female. We also heard, and I represent a district that includes UCSF. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I am intensely proud that UCSF is in the district I represent. It's one of the very, very, I'll say it's the best institution in the world. Let's be. It's and I love. Sorry, okay. I shouldn't offend my colleagues when they're voting on my bill, but I'm very proud to represent UCSF, and one of the reasons I chose the insurance that I chose is because I can go to UCSF if I need to. So I love UCSF, but I think we also need to be clear that these surgeries are being performed, and we know that even from UCSF. There was, if anyone, I don't remember if anyone served in the committees that heard the resolution in 2018. There was a physician from UCSF, Dr. Baskin, who came up repeatedly, and it was crystal clear that those surgeries were being performed. He stopped coming up because he was saying some really over-the-top things. And now he was from UCSF. And we know that Medi-Cal, and this is a little bit overbroad in terms of the category, but since 2004, 15,000 surgeries have been performed. Some of those have been medically necessary, and some of those are distal hypospadias, which we've taken out of the bill. But so it's a lower number than 15,000. It's not zero, and it's not even close to zero. Yes, it was worse 30 years ago. I absolutely agree. The medical profession is evolving on this, and I commend the medical profession for evolving on this. But that evolution is not complete. The surgeries are still happening when they're not medically necessary. I also agree with the doctor that the physicians would not willfully harm anyone. I think that is the opposite of physicians want to do right by their patients. This is not about willfully harming, but this is about harm that does happen as a result of these choices, even though it's completely not what's intended. People are trying to help, but sometimes that help causes harm, and that's why we need to legislate. We also know the statistics we have is that 90% of kids with CAH are receiving vaginoplasties or clitoroplasties. So this is not like, to say this is just not happening, it's not real. If it weren't happening, the question is, we wouldn't be here, or we'd say, why, then let's just put it into law. But the surgeries are happening, and that's why this is necessary. So colleagues, I appreciate you all taking the time both to meet with me, to meet with the advocates, to really dig in. I'm deeply appreciative for your time and your focus, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator Weiner. Your passion for this issue may even exceed your passion for SB 50. But you've been a tenacious advocate, more than an advocate. You care greatly about this community, that you are hopeful that this bill will help, and are deserving of great praise for that. And I think that it's clear to me that we have lots of areas of agreement. I don't support sex assignment surgery. But I also have to be cognizant of the fact that there are a number of children who have had procedures done that aren't about sex assignment, that parents and physicians, in their best judgment, have thought were to their benefit. And I don't think that necessarily establishes their gender identity. I think in some cases it could potentially affect that circumstance, and that's not a good thing. But I think that my concern with your bill today is that I think it goes in the right direction in so many different ways, and it's difficult to say, well, then let's move it forward. But I do think it requires some more work, and I do think it requires some narrowing in regard to the definition. I think we can find a pathway. Unfortunately, the bill in its current form is not one. I think that we can stop sex assignment surgery in California. I think we can lead the nation on this important human rights issue. And it's with reluctance that I can't find myself under the bill as written today and encouraging its passage. So with that, Senator Hill.
Make a couple comments, Mr. Chair?
Course.
Thank you. And I have to tell you, Senator Weiner, what a pleasure it is to work with you. It really is, because you test us continuously in this body. And it is, we spent a lot of time on this issue. We've talked about it a number of times. And, I think of the pain that the sex assignment surgery has caused in certain instances to certain people, and the difficulty that they have. And, anyone who is a parent or now a grandparent, I look at those issues, and I just think that it is such a challenging circumstance. But I was, as this has evolved in my thinking, the issue of really do no harm. And I know the medical profession, that is the foundation. For me, as I looked at this, I was looking at my sense of that and my feeling of I don't want to do harm by making a decision. And I looked at the medical board and their role in this and the committee that would be established, and I just find I'm not comfortable with that. And then the 6-year-old, that arbitrary number or age, I look at my granddaughter who's 5, almost 6, and I'm thinking, I don't know if that's something that she could make that decision on. And so there are a number of issues involved in this, and as the chair indicated, I'm there. There are just too many uncertainties for me where I think my vote could cause harm at some point in time, and that's the challenge for me. But I hope you keep that in something different. I'll be voting no, unfortunately. But thank you.
All right, Senator Galgiani.
I'm proud to be supporting your bill today. I have multiple scoliosis. That means that I have a curvature in my spine because my left leg is a little bit longer than my right leg. I didn't even know about it until I was much older and came across it when I was doing a physical to get onto the track team in high school. I don't know that my parents even know that I have it. It doesn't affect my daily life. I forget that I even have it until something like this comes up, and it makes me think about it. And I think back with all of the young people who maybe have had surgeries where it wasn't medically necessary, and who may in the future, particularly from rural areas or areas where we don't have specialists that are as advanced in their knowledge and medical knowledge in the field, where there would be mistakes that would be made and the life-altering changes. And I just think it's time to stop and look at maybe the harm that's been done, and how do we put a pause on that. And I trust the medical field enough that I believe if there was an urgency that didn't fit within the confines of this bill, that there would be an ability to still move forward with the surgery, and that well-minded people with good intentions at heart would see that there is a need and that surgery could occur without having to come under any penalties under this bill. I don't think that this bill was intended to go after doctors and penalize, but it was intended to set the record straight and just take things back and say, let's not put so much emphasis on what's normal and what society tells us is normal. It's just like, no one can see that I have a curvature in my spine, and it doesn't matter to me or to anybody else. And if it's something that someone can't see, unless it's medically necessary, it shouldn't matter. And I think we put too much emphasis as a society on what is normal. So I'm proud to support the bill. I think that there is a pathway to get there, and that I know the author, I know his commitment to the issue, I know his commitment to working with different groups and individuals and really persevering to get things right. I think that we have time to still do that. There's always follow-up legislation as well, but I'm proud to support your bill today.
Thank you, Senator Galgiani. Senator Dodd.
Yes, for the sake of time, I'd like to associate my comments with Senator Hill. But just first of all, I do thank the Senator Wiener for his passion on this issue. This goes way back. We've had a number of different, conversations. As a grandfather to four, one boy and three granddaughters in that space between 5 and 7, I totally concur. I find it just absolutely impossible to believe at that age that they're going to that age is any panacea from the standpoint of taking something so important like this and moving it, to age 6. I just can't see it. Maybe as time moves on, I'll learn more and change on this. But for today, I'm not going to be able to be there.
All right. Thank you, Senator Dodd. Senator Wiener, do we want to leave it here as it stands, or is there something? Do you want to have a vote? What would you prefer there?
I would like to have a vote, and I, even though we've already had, I think, a pre-vote of sorts, but I closed. I didn't realize that members were making comments. There are just two quick things I would like to address. I thought it was over, and I would normally close at the end, not before all the comments were made.
Okay.
Just two quick things. First of all, just to be clear in terms of the 6-year-old, this bill doesn't say that the 6-year-old decides. This bill says that the parent decides in consultation with the physician when the kid is 6. And yes, we do that. We're not saying the kid makes the choice. The parent makes the choice at 6 when the kid can at least speak words and communicate. And so that I just want to make clear, because it sounded like that. I want to make sure there's no confusion there. And in terms of the medical necessity, we made a good faith effort to try to come up with a system to address concerns that we heard. But it just as what I said at the beginning, this is the first policy committee in the first house of the legislature, and that is an issue that we're going to continue to work on. We will continue to invite the California Medical Association and others to engage with us on the definition of medical necessity. And so I would hope, I don't think any of us can say that we've had no bills where there aren't maybe some definitions that need to be worked out after the first policy committee. And so I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
All right, very good. So at this point, I'm going to recognize the motion from Senator Leyva to move the bill. The Secretary would call the roll.
Motion is due pass the Senate Judiciary Committee. Glazer? Chang? Archuleta? Dodd?
No.
Dodd, no. Galgiani? Aye. Galgiani, aye. Hill?
No.
Hill, no. Leyva? Aye. Leyva, aye. Pan?
No.
Pan, no. Wilk?
No.
Wilk, no.
All right, Senator, the bill is short of votes to get out. Sorry about that. I hope that we can work together in the
Ask for
future.
reconsideration.
Okay. Without objection, the matters will be reconsidered.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.